The restaurant was alive with chatter, golden chandeliers spilling light like liquid fire across polished marble floors, but every eye seemed to orbit around the same table, where Damien Veyers, the young billionaire whose arrogance filled every room before he even walked into it, leaned back in his chair with the smugness of a man who believed the world owed him applause. He snapped his fingers at the waitstaff, spoke loudly enough for his words to sting, and smirked at the discomfort he caused. And then, as if fate itself had grown tired of his games, his piercing gaze settled on the young waitress weaving quietly between tables, her hair tied back, her shoes scuffed, her apron stained by a long night of work. Her name was Lila. To Damien, she was invisible, just another nameless servant carrying trays and forced smiles. But to life itself, Lila carried a weight that few could imagine. Every night she worked double shifts to cover her mother's medical bills, to keep the electricity on in their small apartment, to make sure her younger brother had enough food on the table. Behind her tired eyes lived a resilience carved out of hardship, and behind her silence lived a voice the world had forgotten she had. Damien, however, saw only opportunity for mockery. As the live band struck up a jazz rhythm in the corner of the restaurant, he raised his glass and laughed loudly. "I dare you," he said with the kind of arrogance that silenced even his friends at the table. "Go on, waitress. Dance for us. Show us if you can do more than carry plates." Lila froze, her cheeks burning as laughter rippled across the room. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, to let the humiliation roll past her. But something in the music awakened the ache in her bones, a memory of who she once was before the weight of survival pressed her into silence. She had once danced under the stars at her grandmother's porch, had once dreamed of stages instead of tables. And though every instinct screamed at her to walk away, another voice whispered louder, "Don't let him define you." Friends, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in moments where life flips the script on arrogance and cruelty, take a moment now, like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Stories Collection. Your support helps us continue telling stories that remind us all of the beauty of resilience and the power of the human spirit. And then it happened. Lila put down her tray, her trembling hands steadying themselves as if gripped by unseen courage. The crowd chuckled, expecting clumsiness, expecting another reason to mock. But when she stepped into the light and let the rhythm guide her, the restaurant fell silent. Her body became an instrument of emotion, every turn a release of the pain she carried, every movement a testimony of survival, every breath a song without words. The laughter died. Even Damien's smirk faltered as his arrogance collided with awe. Her dance was not polished, not rehearsed, but it was real. She spun with the raw energy of someone who had tasted hunger, lifted herself from despair, and still found grace in motion. She became the music, and for those few minutes, everyone in that grand restaurant forgot the wealth that divided them, forgot their judgments, forgot the roles they played. They saw only her light. When the music stopped, the silence was so deep it felt holy. Then applause erupted, thunderous, uncontainable. Strangers rose to their feet. Even the band looked stunned, as if they had been mere background to a miracle. Lila stood breathless, her chest rising and falling, her eyes wide with the shock of what she had unleashed. Damien rose slowly, his arrogance shattered like glass underfoot. For the first time in years, His wealth meant nothing, his bravado no shield. What he had tried to use as mockery had instead revealed something far greater than himself. He attempted a hollow smile, but the crowd's eyes were not on him anymore. They were on her, the waitress who had stolen not just the spotlight, but their hearts. What no one knew, except Lila herself, was that this moment had been waiting for her all along. For months she had rehearsed quietly in her bedroom when exhaustion threatened to drown her. For years she had buried her dream under the rubble of responsibility. And now, without meaning to, Damien's cruel dare had given her a stage she never thought she'd see again. That night, a woman in the audience approached her with tears streaming down her face. She wasn't just a diner. She was a talent scout for a performing arts foundation, one that offered scholarships and opportunities to those with brilliance but no means. She handed Lila her card, her voice trembling as she said, "You don't belong behind trays. You belong on stage." The shock left Lila speechless. For the first time, the possibility of a future beyond survival stretched out before her. And in that very instant, Damien realized he had not humiliated her, he had unleashed her destiny. Lila's life began to change. The scholarship opened doors. The performances gave her a voice again. Her story spread far beyond the restaurant walls, an anthem of courage whispered to anyone who had ever been underestimated. She worked harder than ever, not just for herself, but for her mother and brother. Each stage she stepped onto carried with it the weight of her journey, and each ovation reminded her that even the smallest spark can light the darkest path. But perhaps the most shocking twist was Damien himself. At first, he tried to reclaim his pride, but the echo of that night stayed with him like a haunting lesson. For the first time in his life, he saw the ugliness of his arrogance and the emptiness of his wealth. He sought her out, not for forgiveness, but to thank her. For showing him that greatness is not measured in money, but in courage. For humbling him when no one else dared. And though Lila never forgot the pain of that night, she also never denied that it had been the turning point of her life. What began as an insult had become an invitation to reclaim her dreams. And what began as arrogance had, in its own twisted way, given birth to change, not just for her, but for him too. So to you, dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of resilience and the beauty of second chances, I ask you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Stories Collection, so together we can spread stories that lift the human spirit. And before you go, I have a special request. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever been underestimated, and did it push you to rise stronger? Your words might just inspire someone else tonight. Lila stood at the edge of the dance floor long after the applause had faded, her body still trembling, not from fear but from the rush of freedom that had coursed through her veins. The tray she had set down was still balanced on the counter, plates untouched, but no one cared anymore. The room had shifted. The woman who had walked in as an invisible waitress now stood in their minds as something unforgettable. She had cracked through the glass of expectation, and the shards glistened around her like diamonds. But the high of that moment soon gave way to the reality she returned home to. In their small apartment, her mother lay on the worn sofa, too weak to stand some days, her medicine bottles stacked like fragile soldiers on the counter. Her younger brother, Matthew, still in high school, buried himself in textbooks. Pretending he didn't notice the bills piling up, Lila kissed them both that night with tears still in her eyes. "One day," she whispered into the quiet, "one day things will change." She didn't yet know that, one day, had already begun. The talent scout who had seen her dance returned the next week. She wasn't just being kind, she was determined. She explained that her foundation existed to find hidden gems in unexpected places, to give hope where hope seemed impossible. She told Lila her dance was more than skill, it was a story, a living poem carved from her scars. At first, Lila hesitated. How could she leave the safety of the little income she earned? How could she risk her family's survival on a dream that had already been buried once? But something in her heart refused to stay silent anymore. She remembered the sound of the crowd rising to their feet, the tears in strangers' eyes, the way the music had carried her like it was always meant to. For the first time in years, she dared to imagine that maybe her dream wasn't selfish, it was salvation. She began to train after her shifts, body aching from exhaustion, feet blistered from dancing until sunrise. The same restaurant where Damien had tried to humiliate her became her silent witness. When the staff cleaned up after hours, she stayed behind, practicing on the polished floors, her reflection watching from the windows. Sometimes she failed, sometimes she cried, but every time she rose again, stronger. Meanwhile, Damien's world began to unravel in ways no one expected. His friends, who had laughed with him that night, slowly began to treat him differently. They had seen the truth, that his arrogance had been dismantled by a waitress, and the shame of it lingered in their eyes. Deals he once pursued fell apart. His confidence cracked, and yet, instead of growing bitter, something new began to grow inside him. He could not forget Lila's face, the way she had turned his cruelty into light. He had never seen courage like that, and it haunted him. One evening, weeks later, Damien returned quietly to the restaurant, not with friends, not with his arrogant smirk, but alone. He sat in the corner, unnoticed, watching as Lila moved between tables. She still carried trays, but he could see it now, the fire in her steps, the rhythm in her very walk. He realized then that what he had mistaken for a powerless waitress was a woman who carried galaxies inside her. He left without speaking that night, but he began to change. He donated anonymously to charities, funded medical programs, and even started a foundation for underprivileged artists. Few knew the truth. It was Lila who had opened his eyes. When Lila's first performance on a real stage finally came, the theater was packed. Her mother, fragile but smiling, sat in the front row with Matthew. The curtains rose, and once again, the music became her wings. She didn't just dance, she told her story through movement. She told of nights working late, of pain buried deep, of laughter stolen and reclaimed, of a waitress who refused to let arrogance destroy her spirit. And in the very back of the theater, unseen but present, Damien sat, humbled, watching as the girl he once mocked became the woman who redefined him. Her final bow was met with tears and thunderous applause, but for Lila, the real victory wasn't the ovation. It was the quiet strength of knowing she had not let life break her, the knowledge that even in the darkest places, light can still find its way through. And in that moment, the arrogant dare that was meant to humiliate her had become the very key that unlocked her destiny. Sparkles, dear viewer, if this journey touched your heart, if you felt even a spark of Lila's courage stirring inside you, please like this video, share it with someone who may need hope, and don't forget to subscribe to Stories Collection. Speech Balloon Special Request. Comment below and tell us, what dream have you buried that you wish to bring back to life? Your story could be the spark that helps someone else rise again.